Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are, folks. This is the Roaming Prepper Channel. I'm your host, Pete, and thank you. Um, Today, I want to go a little bit off the preparedness track and talk about our society as a whole and something in particular, especially in the Western world, uh, that we've taken for granted for years. We've all talked about it, but how can it affect us in a larger scope? And what I want to talk about specifically is the the fact that with the increases in inflation and the interest rate increases, we're seeing people struggling to make ends meet. There was a young girl, well, I say young lady, 25-ish, right out of college on TikTok, and she was talking about she had a degree, she had her first job, and she said, "My dad raised four of us on a salary of under 100 grand." And she's making about 60 something 55, but it's just her. She said, "It's just me. Dad raised four of us, plus we had acreage and animals and all that, and mom got to stay home." And she said, "I can barely make ends meet, making what should be more than enough for me based on what dad made." And she's not wrong. The truth is, it's become very difficult for people to make a living. But even during the 2008 crisis, people built wealth in America because you could own property. You could mortgage it, you could buy it outright, but you could get that equity and you could roll it from home to home. And it became a source of wealth over the long term, kind of like a personal 401k. Um, but now that's not the case. Now, instead, what we have is a situation where people just can't afford to live anymore. My microphone's being weird. And more importantly, people can't afford to keep their homes, and this is going to cause multiple problems. So I want to talk about this for a second. So this, I've seen multiple articles about this, but this one says home foreclosures are soaring nationwide and rising fastest in these five states. And then they go on to talk about some of the situation. They're saying tight inventory is keeping housing prices elevated. So normally, say an empty nester like myself, I'm relatively young, and I'm like, okay, I just reload with the company, and I'm like, okay, I want to buy a bigger house because I want my granddaughter to spend the weekend or whatever. Um, in the past, and I'm talking the last 15, 20 years, I could simply find another home and then, use my equity and roll it over. The problem is interest rates have gone up so drastically that right now, even buying my same home right now at the same price I got it for, 4 years ago when I moved here, but just changing the interest rate, if I took the same down payment, same credit score, same everything, just changing the down payment, it literally increased my monthly mortgage by 55% on my current payment. So I have no motivation to look for a new home unless I'm forced to. I have no motivation to refinance my home because none of the numbers make sense. I'm going to wind up paying more probably for less house. So people like myself or people who normally would upgrade their home, oh, we've had another kid, let's get a bigger house. They're not doing that because the numbers don't add up. So what they're doing is we're all sitting on our houses, right? Nobody wants to reload, nobody wants to move. Therefore, people entering the market cannot find those used homes, I call them, or pre-existing homes that are already lived in, but they could get maybe for a little bit less, a little bit lower payment. They can't do that. Even the old homes, 40, 50, 60 years old, I'm seeing some that were built in the 1950s. Guys are trying to buy them now, and they're like, I have a new build and I wanted to get this big house, this older house with more property, and the numbers don't make sense. Even though it's only, say, 100 grand more than what I currently have, the payments are disproportionate. And this is going to start becoming a problem. Home foreclosures rose again as Americans continue to grapple with the ongoing cost of living crisis. This is going to be yet another variable we need to consider. And there are a couple of things I want you to think about. On the one hand, and sorry, my screen's being weird. On the one hand, you're going to have a situation where um, people are going to get kicked out of their home, right? That alone is going to increase homelessness. It's also going to mean those people who have to foreclose on their home or leave their home will have to rent. They're going to have to rent at a higher payment because they have a foreclosure. And it's going to put more pressure on the rental side of things, which is already struggling to keep up. Two, it's going to increase the possibility that you're going to have a lot more vacant and abandoned homes in any given subdivision. Now, people don't think of that. We often think of, oh, wow, yeah, this person lost their home and now they rent and they lost their equity, and that's sad. And yes, it is. But now you have houses in your subdivision that are empty. They're not being occupied. People don't live there. And these are the type of homes where they get kind of occupied by parties that shouldn't be there, and you get squatters. And so, ergo, you start creating that environment where the more empty and abandoned homes you have in an area, the more likely you are to attract a criminal element who will use that home as a base of operations, which then damages the well being of the overall area. So you're going to have that dual effect. You also have the factor that companies may come in and buy these homes and then resell them at some future point, and that may drive the costs higher. Now, if you're still in your home and you're going to sell, that might work in your behalf, but it's going to hurt people entering the market. You're going to see a lot of people who are not able to make ends meet. And so that's going to lead to an increase in homelessness, more pressure on rentals, and possibly an increase in crime. You also figure when people lose their home, they tend to go into a depression, right? This is a very tragic thing. And you're going to start seeing even more increased use of, how shall I say, self medicating to deal with the stresses of their life. These are things you need to watch in your area. If you start seeing a lot of homes that are going up on sale and they can't sell them, and we're starting to see it here in my part of Texas, but here is such a busy work environment, it's not as bad as some other places in general in the US. You stand the risk of introducing a lot more stressors into the environment. Also, if the houses stay off the market long enough, the bank's going to drop the price in order just to get it off their books, right? Because they're going to take a loss anyway. And what you wind up happening is they're not going to do as good a job of vetting who buys the home because they're just trying to get rid of it. And you may introduce folks that may not be the best neighbors into your home. Now, I'm not trying to imply racism or anything like that. I'm talking about the fact that it may go into a foreclosure and you might wind up with, say, a halfway house or a rehab home taking and occupying your neighbor's house. Um, this can be problematic for a variety of reasons. And granted, folks trying to get their lives together need a place to live. I get that. But these are all little variables that you need to factor in your community. So pay attention to the trends as far as where homes are going for sale, where they're getting foreclosed, and more importantly, where they are remaining abandoned for an extended period. Because in my own experience, houses that remain abandoned and unattended to for long enough inevitably will get occupied by people who shouldn't be there, and that increases crime. Also, another economic factor, let's say the bank sells at a very low price to get it off their book. Let's say the folks are not criminals, they're not bad, they're just nice folks who were able to get a good deal. The price of their house being so much lower than yours will actually diminish the possible sale price you can get if and when you choose to move, or if you choose to refinance, or if you want to improve your house. It actually will hurt home prices for everyone else. And it just makes it harder for the average American or the average Westerner to build wealth and make a living and then maybe pass that on to their kids. This has the undertones of you will own nothing and be happy. And in reality, folks are really not happy. But in any case, folks, something to pay attention to. It's getting really hard. Some ways to solve this or counteract this, I've actually seen people go into the let's buy a bigger house with a piece of land, but let's get two or three families involved at once, which now goes back to the old way of living on a family estate or a family property where you may have 10 acres split between four siblings or something like that. Or the parents get a big house and it has a separate bathroom, separate area, and now one of their kids with their kids and their son-in-law, daughter-in-law move into that part of the house. And now you're going to start seeing extended families moving back into a single residence or a single homestead or a single estate, depending on how you're set up. So that actually might not be a terrible idea, uh, to allow the younger generation to kind of get their bearings, but also to save everyone money. And it may actually have the effect of keeping families closer together, which in today's day and age is not a bad thing. In any case, just some things to think about. Again, if you're going to reload, you're going to sell your home, refinance, do your homework, run the calculations. Don't just listen to a realtor. Sure as hell don't listen to a house salesman. Get your numbers right. And if they don't make sense, they don't put you in the black and they put you in the red, it's probably not a good idea. Folks, I'll leave you with that thought. You guys be safe, be smart, run your numbers, do your homework, and I'll see you on the next video. God bless.